Hello everybody and welcome to the config and tech video for alien isolation. Probably noticed my logo's changed again, just slightly. I've changed it from that, and this is reflected on my channel as well. I've changed it from that kind of lilac blue to red. I just think it kind of suits things better, so I'm going to try to leave it alone at this point. I think it looks as good as I can get it. Let's open up our screens here. So I've got the install directory over here. You are not going to have any of these highlighted files in here. You'll have some extra ones in here probably that aren't shown. I've just hidden those extra files so they won't be a distraction with what we talk about here, because I won't be utilizing them for anything. These are related to mods and adjustments that I will get into. But these are the core files you'll have here. A data folder, an extras folder. This is where all the data, important goodies are going to be. Extras just kind of contains some images. It's really nothing. And then you have your AI, Alien Isolation executable. So in this video, we will be setting up Alien Isolation general and advanced settings where needed. This will hopefully put the game in the best playable state it can be. Then there will be a modding video that follows this video. Any links that are covered in this video will be in the description below. So I'm going to start with preliminary options. These are settings that need to be adjusted before you adjust the in-game options. The adjustments you make with the file below will dictate the menu options you get once you are in the game. These settings all revolve around a file called engine_settings.xml, which we'll cover in detail below. So graphic tweaks utilizing this engine_settings.xml file. These adjustments are based on the work of Angel Graves 13. They posted a Steam guide about all of this, which you can find below. Thanks Angel Graves 13 for putting this out there to begin with. So this link will be in the description for you to go to download this this file. I will still explain and go over these settings myself. Please reference the Angel Graves 13 guide as well as what I am showing you here. Their guide is detailed and shows screenshot examples. It should be stated I am using the modded engine_settings.xml as is. I didn't edit anything in the file as there is no need to. Important. This file is located at the following path. Whatever drive letter you have it installed under. Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Alien Isolation, and Data. So your data folder. And you will find it right here. Make sure you back up your engine_settings.xml file before you make any changes. Just copy and paste it in there and rename it something else, so you can revert back to it. Okay, so what do these tweaks actually do? Essentially, it gives you a better level of detail setting, 4K quality shadows, an FOV or field of view changed from vertical to horizontal, and adds an alternative planar reflections option. The adjustments are not automatic or maxed as high as they can go. You still adjust what you want through the game's menu. The menu is updated to reflect the new options and their values. If you have a reasonably decent gaming PC, you'll have no issue maxing these settings out. So the first thing is the level of detail, or the LOD, L-O-D. It's sort of like view distance settings in games. An example off the top of my head would be World of Warcraft, at least classic World of Warcraft. It had an actual option in the video settings called view distance. It's basically where the lower the LOD is, the more texture pop-in you see in the distance. This will increase the LOD, giving you more detail on objects in the distance. The next thing that it will adjust is the shadow map resolution. This adjustment pushes it to a 4K resolution, resulting in better shadow quality overall. I think the game, there's a 2K option in the menu, but there may be a 1K option as well. The 1K may be the original. The mod may have added the 2K and definitely the 4K, but the 2K may have been the default, I'm not sure. Anyway, you'll want to use the 4K version. The next one is FOV, or field of view. Alien Isolation uses vertical FOV as opposed to the standard horizontal FOV of most games. This tweaks the FOV to make it horizontal and reflects those values for adjustments. Normally you would set a horizontal FOV to around 90 as a baseline. Let me write that in there as a baseline. In this game you only want to go as high as 85 with this adjustment. Anything higher and you won't be able to see Amanda's legs in the game. And I don't mean that in a perverted way, I just mean when you look down at your character and whatnot, you won't be able to see her body anymore. I'm not sure. You can see her arms and hands in the game. I don't know that it affects that. I think it just affects the legs. So only set it as high as 85. You can see my FOV explanation video if you want more details on that, and I'll put that in the description of this video. It's a segment I cut out of my Firewatch video explaining FOV in detail. The alternate planar reflections. It makes shiny floors more reflective. Some will like this and some will not, so it comes down to your preference. On is normal and alternate is the more reflective setting, or the maxed out version that this mod offers. And that covers those things. It's really only those four. Let me just scroll up here again. Yeah, level of detail, the LOD, the shadows, the FOV, and then the reflections on the floor. I think the reflections only apply to floors. They quite possibly could apply to ceilings and walls, but I think it's mainly the floor. And if you look at Angel Graves 13, if you look at his guide that I'll link to also in the description, he has pictures showing exactly what the default versus his tweaks look like. That's why I'm not providing any examples here, because you can go there and see perfect examples. So yeah, I definitely recommend that you use that. It's going to make the game look a lot better. Definitely a lot better. Without much of a hit to your PC. So the next category here is the intro videos, skipping them. It is possible to skip these and load straight to the title screen. Go to the following path on your PC, starting in your Alien Isolation folder. Go to Data, and go to UI, and then go to Movies. You'll find the following files. So it will be this one, and this one. Rename these files to .bak or backup to back up your originals, which will change the name of them because the game is looking for them to not have the .back at the end, which will make them not play. Sometimes when you do this in games, they'll still play, like the length of time the video would play will still carry out, and you'll have to wait at the same time anyway. You'll just see a black screen. Other games will completely skip them and will just go to the next, next loading area, which would be the title screen. You can also just delete the files as well if you do not care about them at all and you don't, care about having backups. Just deleting them will be okay. Sometimes doing that in other games as well will work, and sometimes it won't. It'll cause the game to go into like an infinite loading loop where it will never get to the title screen. Not this game, but just know doing these kinds of things, it's game specific. You'll just have to try. If you can narrow down, intro videos in games that you don't want to watch anymore or have load every time you play them, it's just going to vary from game to game what method is going to work. So that's what you can do with these if you want to skip them. All right. Okay, getting on to the normal options of the game. Now we'll go over the in-game settings. With the adjustments we made above, we can now select some better versions of those settings. That's why I had you do those adjustments first, so they can be reflected in the menu. Let me take a sip of drink. Okay, so your first category under settings in the game is game. And in there, the first section you'll run into is control scheme. This gives you controller presets to pick from for keybinds. I think there's like 5 or 6, maybe 4 or 5 different presets you can go through for your controller. Input mapping, this is where you will pick keybinds for the mouse and keyboard. So basically the same thing, but for mouse and keyboard. Mouse sensitivity and controller sensitivity, just always start off in the middle of the slider, and if you need to go up or down, then go up or down from there. Invert X and Y axis, leave these off unless you want to reverse these actions, make left movement be a right movement in the game, or when you look up in the game, you do a down movement, with your controller, thumbstick, or with your mouse. So it kind of does the opposite. If you just want it to be normal, like if you move the mouse upward or you move your thumbstick upward, then your character will look up. Aim assist, used for playing on a controller to help you with your aiming. My aim assist is to use a mouse instead. Smiley face. Really has no bearing on using a mouse. If you're playing with mouse and keyboard, this setting, even if it's on, should be ignored. Vibration only affects gamepads. We have vibrating headphones now thanks to haptics. Why don't we have a mouse that vibrates yet? I'm sure we all want a vibrating mouse. Next category of settings, when you go back out from the game category, is video. And your first setting in the video settings is adjusting your gamma or your brightness. Set your brightness according to the provided image. I run my games a little darker than normal, so don't go by where I have my gamma set. Adjust it according to what looks good for you. FOV, field of view. If using the graphic tweaks engine_settings.xml adjustments from above, set this to a maximum of 85, otherwise Amanda's legs will not be visible. So I'm just letting you know again. And it could affect other things too besides just that. I've never ran it in 90. I've ran it at 85, so I don't know. Film grain intensity. Use your preference on this setting. Film grain is a setting I always disable in games. Very few games. Let me reword this. There are very few games where it is utilized well. So recommended, put the slider to 0. It's just going to degrade the graphics in the game. I get why it's there, but Screen size, I recommend full screen, but it's your choice. Deep color, a little hard to find clear-cut information on this setting. I would say leave it on unless you're experiencing some color weirdness when you play, which you really shouldn't. I think it's a thing too, the deep color, where it may be more common now, but when the game was out in 2014, monitors and televisions weren't even, most of them weren't able to utilize this deep color setting anyway, which may have changed now, so another reason why I would recommend leaving it on. Full screen resolution, pick your resolution here. I will be playing at 1920 by 1080p. Vertical sync. I don't have one of those fancy G-Sync monitors or TVs that handles V-Sync for you automatically. So I always turn this on in my games, or I force it on through my GPU, my graphics card. It keeps your GPU from having to push out more frames per second, FPS, than needed. Also, it also eliminates screen tearing in the visuals as you play. Here's a screenshot of what screen tearing looks like in a game. Speedrunners and the like will tell you enabling VSync causes input lag. While this may be true, I am not speedrunning this. I'd rather have a slight input delay than screen tearing ruining the visuals. Honestly, I've never felt any bad input lag over the many years of using VSync in PC games. Also, that input lag probably would fall more into the realm of using a gamepad, I would assume. I don't know if it affects things like mouse and keyboard lag. I guess it can. But anyway, you can set your FPS higher than 60 FPS if you want to. I don't know the limits, as I am operating at 60 Hertz or 60 frames per second. I do know if your FPS is too high, it will break animations in the game. I've seen this occur on vent covers Amanda opens. She still opens them, but they look weird when she does it. Her hands aren't aligned with what she's manipulating. Lot or level of detail. If using the graphic tweaks engine _settings.xml adjustments, I recommend putting this up to the ultra setting. If you're having FPS frame rate issues, then try dropping it down to high. You really shouldn't have an issue running this at ultra. Determines the view distance more or less. The higher the setting, the less texture model pop in you will see. Shadow map resolution. If using the graphic tweaks engine _settings.xml adjustments, I recommend putting this up to 4096 setting, or basically 4K. If you are having FPS frame rate issues, then try dropping it down to 2084, or essentially 2K. And I do believe there is a 1K option in there, but you should be able to get away with 2K. This setting has the potential, though, to be one of the most FPS draining settings for low-end PCs, so keep that in mind, depending on what kind of system you're running. Shadow mapping. It's hard to explain exactly what this setting does. It aids in the improvement of shadow quality. I recommend putting it on contact hardening, as that is the highest setting. I tried getting a good description of contact hardening, but I wasn't really able to find one, so I'm not going to say something that is probably inaccurate. Particles. This setting is regarding things like electrical sparks, fire embers, and general effects from the environment and weapons. Should be fine to max this out to ultra. Motion blur, a setting I generally turn off in any game I play, as I don't like it. The blur is applied to your weapon when you turn your character. If you are using the alias isolation mod that we will get into, this setting has to be turned on. I will let this setting slide for this game so that I can have better anti-aliasing. We'll cover that in the modding video. Depth of field. a setting I also turn off in any game I play, usually. This effect blurs things in the background to make what is in the foreground stand out more. In the case of this game, though, and others as well, it can also blur the foreground to make things in the background stand out more, so it can go both ways. But generally, it is an effect that is used to blur out the background. I get its intended design for setting up scenes in a game or movie, but I still hate it, as it is blurring good graphics that I want to see. Some games, though, don't fully render what they are blurring with FOV, so if you turn the setting off, the game I played on my channel, Unravel, did this. It's a game where it's better to leave the depth of field on. I think I did leave it on in that game, because if you turn it off, you'll actually see the background clearer, but not really, because they didn't fully render the background, thinking you would leave it blurred with depth of field. So in turn, it makes it look worse, you know. So in this game, it's not the case. This setting has a real effect on gameplay, actually, if depth of field is on. When you use your motion tracker, it will introduce the depth of field effect, making it hard to see what you're doing, which is another reason to leave it off. I'm going to try to remember to show an example of it. I'll turn depth of field on in the game and show you. But when you have the motion tracker out, I think that it is clear, but everything in front of you is blurry unless you're holding the right mouse button. And when you hold the right mouse button, the background is clear, but then the motion tracker is blurry. So if you turn depth of field off, both are just clear all the time, and you don't have to use a button to do anything, which is just more practical. The other thing depth of field does is when you pause the game with depth of field on, it puts depth of field on the background of the game when it's paused. When it's paused with that setting off, it's clear as day. So in this game particularly, I would highly advise to disable depth of field, if nothing else, to make your motion tracker easier to use. Chromatic aberration. I remember Alien Isolation being the game that made me realize I hate this setting too. It kind of does a color bleeding effect with vapor trails around an object. If you are using the alias isolation mod, this setting has to be turned off in the game, which is fine by me, LOL. Within the alias isolation program, you can adjust chromatic aberration if you still want to use it. I have never used it I've never used it through alias isolation, so I can't speak for how it works. Here's a screenshot of what chromatic aberration looks like in Alien Isolation. You can also see the terrible default anti-aliasing in the game on the left side. It's on both sides, but it's more prevalent on the left. And we get to the next thing here, the planar reflections. Stated before, this makes shiny floors more reflective. Some will like this and some will not, so it comes down to your preference. On is normal and alternative, or alternate is more reflective. I recommend trying alternate first, and if you think it looks bad, then switch the setting to on. Next section is SSAO, or Screen Space Ambient Occlusion. This setting, in one way or another, applies soft shadows around seams. I think that should be spelled S-E-A-M-S. I may be wrong. But it applies a soft shadow around seams and holes of an object, kind of giving also kind of giving an object its own shadow based on what it can cast. And the options you'll have here, you'll have SSAO as a standard option, but you'll also have HDAO, and you'll have HBAO. One is intended for AMD GPU graphic cards, and the other is intended for NVIDIA. Not necessarily, I mean, it is intended, but designed to work better with one or the other, depending on what graphics card you have. But they are more or less the same and should be better than the standard SSAO option. Put this on the highest setting, HDAO+. Creative Assembly must have designed Alien Isolation using AMD GPUs, I suppose, because of this option, and also the intro logo on the game is for AMD. Texture filtering, next option you're going to have here. In complicated terms, it utilizes pixel maps to fill in particular graphic area. It looks at neighboring pixels and tries to match up to them, giving you a seamless, cohesive texture. Set this to anisotropic, it's a hard word to say, 16x, and you'll be fine. It's a standard setting across all kinds of games from the past and the present. Volumetric lighting. This handles how good lighting effects look in the game. Things like sun shafts, light rays, and light sources that shine through windows. Put this setting in the on position. Then we have anti-aliasing. Aliasing is the jagged stair-step effect you see on straight lines in a game. If you are using the alias isolation mod, this setting has to be set to SMAA-T1X. Make sure you aren't using SMAA-T2X. Even with it set to SMAA-T1X, you will be getting TAA or temporal anti-aliasing injected from alias isolation, giving you better AA than even the SMAA-T2X setting in the game. You write that in there. I just correct these things as I go, because I do keep what I keep these text documents for games even after I finish them. So, just for reference. So the SMAA is not a bad anti-aliasing method. It just wasn't implemented well in Alien Isolation, unfortunately. And we will get into this alias isolation mod once we're in the modding video. I know I keep mentioning it. The last category of settings for the game is audio. Your first option will be the sound effects and cutscene volume. Set this to 100. Music volume, set this to either 50% or 100%. I find 50% to be a good music setting for most games, so it doesn't drown out the sound effects and voices, as mentioned. Also, it helps when recording for YouTube to have a more normalized sound. Subtitles, this setting is totally up to you. I tend to use subtitles when I can, as they aren't distracting to me. Sometimes they are even helpful. And your last setting here is dynamic range. I'm not an audiophile genius, so I may be speaking a little out of terms here. Generally, you should get a better sound experience by using full dynamic range. If you have a decent sound system or surround headphones, this is basically the game's surround mode. When games give headphones as an option, it doesn't mean they are talking about surround headphones. They could just be referring to stereo headphones, depending on how old the game is you're playing. So that's pretty much what I have here for Config and Tech. We'll finish this video by going into the game. I'll run down the settings we just covered with you in this video. We'll cover the modding stuff in the next video. So I'm going to do a quick edit cut here in this video, and then we'll see you in the game and we'll go over these settings. So I thank you for watching, and we'll see you there. Bye. Hello everybody, welcome to the in-game portion of the config and technical video. So here's our 3 option settings that I wanted to visually go over here. So we'll start off with game, and here's your control scheme. And it is hard to see because of the planet aura there, but It looks like you get 0, which is default, 1 alternate, default left-handed, and alternate left-handed. So there's 4 presets you can pick from. Right. For your gamepad usage. And then input mappings, this represents keyboard and mouse controls, which is what I'm using. I'll go over the controls, you know, once we're in game playing. And then your mouse sensitivity, controller sensitivity, put those in the middle. X and Y off, aim assist on if you, says there, controller only. So if you want aiming to be more difficult and more under your own precision, I guess leave it off. If you need help with it, then put it on. And then vibration only functioning if you're using a gamepad. And those are all the game settings. Video, adjust the gamma. As I said before, don't go by, I think I'm using it maxed for my purposes. But you can start it off in the middle and work your way up until you get it to where you need it to be. Field of view, 85 is the highest you want to go. 75 is as low as we'll go, and it will go all the way up to 110. So yeah, 85 is as high as you want to go if you don't want to cut off some of your character's body parts. Film grain, I put this on 0 as already stated. I don't like film grain. Screen size full screen, deep color on, pick your resolution. I'm using 1920 by 1080. Vertical sync on, as you can see my readings there. Vertical sync for me is syncing it to 60 FPS. Level of detail ultra, shadow map resolution, the 4096 4K. Shadow mapping, put that on contact hardening. Particles ultra, motion blur needs to be on. If you are using alias isolation to improve the aliasing. If you are not using that, I would recommend keeping motion blur off. Depth of field off, I would advise, as already explained. Chromatic aberration needs to be off if you're using alias isolation for better aliasing. And then the planar reflections, here's where you have the option to not use it at all, so then you'll get no reflective surface, I guess. And then on would be the standard reflective surface. And then alternate will give you the really reflective surface added in by the mod. SSAO, you can put it off on SSAO or the HDAO plus, which I recommend. Anisotropic filtering, put that all the way to 16x. Volumetric lighting on. SMAA T1X is the other setting you need to be using if you're utilizing alias isolation for the better aliasing, better anti-aliasing, I should say. If you're not using alias isolation, then bump this up all the way to SMAA T2X, but you're still going to have terrible aliasing in the game. FXAA is the other anti-aliasing method that the game uses beside SMAA. So that covers all the video settings, of which there is a fair amount of. So those are my adjustments and my recommended adjustments. And then the last one would be audio, where you have your sound effects and cutscene volume, music volume, your subtitles, and then your different audio modes, basically. Headphones, speakers, and then full dynamic range. So speakers, it's hard to say. Essentially, speakers is probably meaning television speakers, just plain ass speakers, or like a sound bar. And then headphones would be with your surround headphones, I guess. Sounds pretty similar. You can hear the switch. It's louder on just normal speakers. I'm using a 7.1 Razer headset, but I'm still opting to keep it on full dynamic range. Of course, once it's on YouTube, it's going to sound more of just a stereo sound anyway, but for playing with headphones, I'm unsure if you should be using headphones or full dynamic range, but I'm going with full dynamic range. And so my readings up here that you can see, my little overlay shows my frame rate, my graphic memory usage, which is, I have an 8 gig, 1,000 megabytes equals, or 1,000 megs equals a gig. I have an 8 gig capacity, so I'm hardly utilizing anything, at least, here on the menu. My computer's memory, I have 32 gigs. It's only utilizing 7.5 gigs, basically. My graphics card temperature is running at 41 Celsius, and my computer CPU's temperature is running at about basically the same. My graphics fan speed is going at 36% out of 100, and my graphics usage total of what's being utilized with my card is only 20%. So, I mean, it depends on the fan curve you're using for your GPU as to how hot your card is going to get, but this game runs really, really well. It's very, 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 very good looking game, functioning game, and performing game. You shouldn't have any troubles with this game. As I've said a few times now, if you've got a decent computer, what you're seeing there is just my my pop-up for reshade, sorry. Just for reshade, which I'm not going to get into. So that covers all the settings here for the game, and that's the rest of this video. So thank you for watching this, and we will see you in the modding video to follow. Bye.